The question came so quietly that at first I thought I had imagined it. The afternoon sun poured through the cracked window of my tiny countryside home, filling the room with warm golden light while dust drifted lazily in the air. The woman standing at my doorway looked exhausted, her clothes wrinkled from days of travel, her eyes carrying the weight of someone who had cried until no tears remained. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for food. She simply looked at the old wooden bed in the corner and whispered whether there was still space left. Without thinking, I smiled sadly and wondered out loud what would happen if, instead of staying for one night, she decided she wanted to stay forever. Neither of us realized that one simple question would change two broken lives before the sun set on the following week. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can change someone's destiny and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Journey of Kindness. Your support allows more stories of hope and compassion to reach people who need them most. Ronan Mercer had lived alone for nearly 6 years in a quiet farming village surrounded by rolling fields and endless skies. Every morning he repaired old furniture in the small workshop beside his cottage, and every afternoon he delivered handmade tables and chairs to neighbors who trusted his careful hands. The work paid little, but it kept his mind occupied. Most people believed he preferred loneliness, but the truth was much heavier. Years earlier, illness had taken his wife before doctors could save her. The house that once echoed with laughter became painfully silent, and every room reminded him of dreams that had ended too soon. Instead of selling the home, Ronan stayed because leaving felt like abandoning the last pieces of the life they had built together. The woman at the door introduced herself as Maris Holloway. She had walked for hours after the last bus left her at the edge of town. Her suitcase had broken along the road, forcing her to carry only a worn backpack filled with a few clothes and faded photographs. She explained that she had nowhere safe to go after leaving a difficult situation she no longer wished to speak about. She wasn't asking for charity. She simply hoped for one peaceful night indoors before continuing her journey the next morning. Ronan could see fear hidden beneath her calm voice. He knew that kind of fear because he had once carried it himself after losing everything that mattered. Without asking unnecessary questions, he offered her the bed while promising he would sleep on an old couch in the workshop. Maris hesitated, embarrassed by his generosity, but exhaustion finally overcame her pride. For the first time in many weeks, she closed her eyes without worrying about rain, strangers, or the darkness. The following morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen table where Ronan quietly prepared fresh bread, scrambled eggs, and tea from herbs growing outside the window. Maris apologized repeatedly for imposing, promising she would leave immediately after breakfast. But as they shared their meal, something unusual happened. They laughed. It was only for a moment after Ronan accidentally burned the toast, yet the sound surprised both of them. It had been years since laughter had visited that little house. Instead of leaving immediately, Maris offered to help clean the neglected garden behind the cottage. The flower beds had become overgrown, and weeds had nearly swallowed the stone pathway. Ronan accepted reluctantly, believing she simply wanted to repay his kindness before moving on. Together they spent the afternoon pulling weeds, trimming bushes, and uncovering colorful flowers that had struggled patiently beneath the wild grass. As the garden slowly returned to life, something inside both of them seemed to awaken as well. Days passed more quickly than either expected. Maris continued helping around the house while Ronan repaired furniture. She proved surprisingly talented at painting delicate floral designs onto wooden cabinets, making his work more valuable than ever before. Customers began noticing the beautiful artwork, bringing more orders than Ronan had received in years. Little by little, the workshop filled with purpose instead of silence. Still, neither dared speak about the future. Maris feared becoming a burden, while Ronan feared losing someone else after finally allowing another person into his life. They lived one day at a time, pretending tomorrow wasn't waiting. One afternoon an elderly neighbor named Mrs. Ellery stopped by to collect a rocking chair Ronan had restored. She noticed how naturally Maris moved around the house, placing fresh flowers on the table and humming softly while sweeping the porch. Before leaving, the old woman quietly told Ronan that homes never become warm because of expensive furniture. They become warm because someone chooses to fill them with kindness again. Those simple words stayed with him long after she disappeared down the dusty road. Meanwhile, Maris struggled with painful memories she had hidden from everyone. She had spent years caring for people who never appreciated her sacrifices. Every act of kindness had been answered with criticism, until eventually she believed she deserved nothing better. Ronan's quiet respect confused her. He never demanded explanations. He never judged her past. He simply treated her as though she mattered. One evening, heavy rain trapped them indoors. Electricity failed, leaving only candlelight dancing across the walls. Sitting near the window, they shared stories they had never intended to tell another soul. Ronan spoke about the loneliness that followed his wife's passing and how he had forgotten what hope felt like. Maris admitted she had spent months believing she was invisible, convinced the world would never again become a place where she felt safe. As thunder rolled across the sky, neither realized how much healing had already taken place. Pain shared honestly became lighter than pain carried alone. The next morning brought unexpected trouble. A wealthy developer arrived with documents offering to buy Ronan's property. Several nearby homes had already been sold to make room for a luxury resort. The offer promised more money than Ronan had ever imagined, but accepting meant destroying the workshop, the garden, and every memory tied to the place. Neighbors encouraged him to sell. They insisted he could start over somewhere better. Yet every corner of that little cottage represented resilience rather than sorrow now. For the first time in years, it no longer felt empty. Maris quietly prepared to leave, believing her presence complicated his decision. She worried people would assume Ronan refused the offer because of her. Without saying anything, she packed her backpack before sunrise and placed a handwritten thank you note beside the kitchen table. When Ronan woke and found the empty room, panic rushed through him stronger than anything he had felt in years. He searched the village streets until he finally spotted her waiting at the small bus stop overlooking golden wheat fields. She looked ready to disappear once again. Instead of begging her to stay, Ronan simply sat beside her. For several minutes neither spoke. Birds circled overhead while warm daylight stretched across the countryside. Finally he admitted that the house no longer felt like home without her footsteps echoing through the hallway. He confessed he wasn't afraid of loneliness anymore. He was afraid of letting fear convince him to lose someone important before even trying to build a future together. Maris lowered her eyes, overwhelmed by emotions she had spent years burying. She confessed she had never expected anyone to choose her presence without expecting something in return. She had forgotten what genuine kindness looked like until she walked through his front door. The bus arrived, paused for only a moment, then continued down the road because no one stepped aboard. Together they walked back home beneath bright blue skies, carrying nothing except hope. The weeks that followed transformed the cottage completely. Children from nearby farms visited after school to help in the garden. Elderly neighbors gathered on weekends to share homemade meals beneath the large oak tree. Ronan expanded his workshop into a small community space where people learned woodworking together, while Maris organized painting classes that encouraged everyone to express memories through art instead of hiding them. Their little home slowly became known throughout the region as a place where no one was turned away hungry or hopeless. Travelers found warm meals, lonely people found conversations, and grieving hearts found understanding. Ronan eventually refused the developer's offer, choosing purpose over wealth. Surprisingly, several neighbors followed his example, protecting the village from becoming another forgotten resort town. Kindness proved stronger than money because it reminded people what truly made a place worth saving. Months later, while planting new roses in the restored garden, Ronan looked toward the same old bed visible through the open window. He smiled as he remembered the question that had begun everything. It had never really been about finding space in a bed. It had been about finding space inside a wounded heart. Maris no longer carried the frightened expression she had worn that first afternoon. Her smile reached her eyes now, and every flower blooming around the cottage seemed to reflect the peace she had finally discovered. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with friends and family, and subscribe to Journey of Kindness. Your support helps spread stories that remind people compassion still exists in this world. Special request. Before this story ends, please comment, kindness always finds a home, if you believe one act of compassion can completely change someone's life. Years later, visitors often asked Ronan and Maris how they had met. They always smiled before looking toward the little wooden cottage surrounded by flowers. they never focused on sadness or loneliness. Instead, they remembered one warm afternoon when a stranger asked for nothing more than a safe place to rest, and another stranger answered with a question that quietly opened the door to an entirely new future. Life rarely changes through grand miracles. More often, it changes through ordinary people making extraordinary choices when kindness seems easier to ignore. A meal shared with a stranger, a room offered without judgment, a patient conversation with someone carrying invisible pain. These small moments become the turning points that rewrite entire lives. And sometimes, the greatest love stories do not begin with promises or perfect timing. They begin with an open door, a warm heart, and the courage to believe that someone who arrives asking for one night's shelter may actually become the family you never knew you were waiting for.